Yeah,
I'd like,
we can wait a couple of minutes more. Yeah.
All the people moving, a little slower.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the topic attracts a certain kind of audience,
it's true.
or not. Yeah.
Depends on if they remember.
Yeah.
people who have never, there's people here who've never attended.
Really?
Yes,
Oh,
which I
good.
really like to
Yeah,
see.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
From different towns,
Yeah.
which is also really nice.
Yeah.
You never know in person what people are gonna,
Or just decide, because it's a hybrid event.
I know,
just
right?
Yeah.
There,
I'll stay
I'm in my
home.
jammies already.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what the Zoom does, right?
Right.
You
Yes.
Zoom it, and then you see them, particularly when the whole Zoom started, you would see them. I remember teaching at the 92nd Street Y, and a gentleman just from I'll give you this house.
Test, can you hear me? Yes, thank you, all right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the last of this year's Snapshot series. My name is Lucinda Walker. I'm the director of this library. I am so excited to be hosting on Forgetting a talk by Ilan Stavans, who has spoken for First Wednesdays, the previous Snapshot series, 3 times in the past, and you're a marvelous presenter, and the information is incredible, so sit back and enjoy. Snapshot is Vermont Humanities weekly program that hosts a variety of speakers at public libraries to foster resilient communities through engaging conversations. We extend our thanks to our partners at Vermont Humanities, as well as to the generous underwriters who make it possible for us to offer such rich and robust programs. The sponsor of the entire Snapshot series is the Vermont Department of Libraries, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, otherwise known as IMLS, and the Alma Gibbs Doshian Foundation. Tonight's program is sponsored by Otto and Associates. So tonight we come together from across the state. There are people listening online right now to learn and to be inspired within community. Before we begin, I have just a few brief housekeeping items. One is the exits are at the back of the room on either side, and there's an exit here. And if you need to use the restroom, it's in the back. And the bookstore is here tonight selling copies of Professor Stavans' books. So please take a look at the books and make a purchase. Our next Snapshot event is Kawaii Culture in Japan and Beyond with the University of Chicago Professor Nisha Kachatam. It will be hosted by the South Burlington Public Library next Wednesday, May 28th at 6 p.m. So, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker. Ilan Stavans is Lewis Sebring Professor of Humanities, Latin American and Latino Culture at Amherst College, the publisher of Restless Books, and a consultant to the Oxford English Dictionary. Translated into more than 20 languages, his work has been adapted into film, TV, radio, and theater. His latest book is Sabor Judeo, the Jewish Mexican Cookbook. So please join me in welcoming Professor Stavans.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Lucila. And thank you. It is an enormous pleasure. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to the Humanities Council for this event, and to this lovely, lovely library in this lovely, lovely town. It is a joy to return now in person, having done this at least once, if not more, via Zoom. I also want to congratulate you, Vermonters, for at a time of intense chaos and disruption, having the public library still as a place of debate, discussion, and gathering, and coming together on a weekly or a monthly basis from different parts of the state. It is an activity that not only the state but the entire country must emulate, and we should continue to fund it in all kinds of ways. I salute all of you Vermonters for setting the pattern, the model for the rest of us. I would like to start, as I often do, in poetry, with a line that it is no exaggeration to say is known by many of the 450 million Spanish speakers in the world, most of whom live in Latin America. It is a line by the superb poet from Chile, Pablo Neruda, who wrote close to 3,500 poems, maybe too many poems, but a few of them feel as if they are an eternal part of the world itself, and it would be easier to make, say, a color disappear out of reality, or an island in any archipelago than the poetry of Pablo Neruda. And he started, Neruda, with a collection of poetry that is called 20 Love Poems and a Song of Despair. He was only 23 years old. And indeed, it contains 20 poems of love, crowned by a song at the end that shows the counterpart of love, which in his view was despair. And of the many extraordinary lines of that book is so important that people who fall in love in Latin America use all kinds of lines to express their love to one another, sometimes offering that line verbatim, and sometimes improving that line and making poetry go back to the oral tradition. That line comes from poem number 20, el poema número 20, and it goes like this: Es tan corto el amor y es tan largo el olvido. Love is so short and forgetting is so long. Love is so short. It is indeed when you are 22 or 23 or 24. It feels like a spark, like an intense moment that will change you forever, and that inspires you to be someone unique and different in front of that person whom you feel has now ignited something internal in you. As you move on through life, love might not be that short, and hopefully it becomes a companion that mutates throughout the various relationships, or the single relationship that you might have and might be your friend. But it is not about love, or maybe not directly about love that I want to talk, but about the second part of that sentence, forgetting. El olvido es tan largo el olvido. Forgetting is so long. It seems to me that there are many ways of talking about forgetting, but very often we resist that embrace of the topic itself, and instead go to its counterpart, which is remembering or memory. Memory is everywhere we go, from the language we use to the buildings we visit, to the art that we make, to the statues that we create. When we enter a museum, we are entering a temple of memory where the society, the culture has elected to harvest what it deems to be the most essential, the most significant, the most meaningful aspects of itself in order to display them for its own members, for those that come after it, the younger generation, and maybe to establish a dialogue with the past as well. A photo album is also a temple of memory, and it used to be that you would open it up and see how the family goes back to the childhood of the grandparent, or the moment in which a child first used the bicycle, or the first kiss that was ever made. And now we have we have mutated from the album itself into the telephone, where we curate in a variety of ways the memories that we have of the past and that identify us as who we are. Any moment that we take a photograph, we are having a dialogue with the present, and we are choosing to capture that moment in the present. But because of the technology, we can have 20 or 30 or 50 different photographs, and then we zoom them, we reduce them to the one where we feel our own pose or our own gesture is the right one, and it's the one that we're going to put on Facebook or on TikTok or show to other people. This is who I am in this particular moment. And if we revisit the many 4,000, 6,000, 10,000 photographs, what we are doing in our phone is taking a trip through the past and see how that past has shaped itself. And it is again a dialogue between the present, the eyes that you see, that are seeing right now, with the photographs of the moments that are long gone. Maybe the past is always a fiction. Maybe the past is always an invention. Maybe the past is only the snapshot that we manage to imprison in order to send into the present and into the future. And what happens to all those photographs that we have eliminated, that we didn't select in order to be in that album that is ours? What happens with all those cultural items that didn't make it to the museum, the statues and the paintings arranged in this way or that way to be perfectly symmetrical? What happens with everything that is left out? I often think of a book as really traveling with its own double. The book that we have, that we can read with everything that it contains, and then the other book, the shadow book, the alter ego book, the nemesis book maybe, of everything that was left out, everything that was not included in it. And that book itself is also a statement of who we are or who we were, the stuff that we didn't want to include, that we left out. How do we define the word forgetting? I went to the dictionary just before this talk. After all, for me, the dictionary is the monument of monuments to remembering and forgetting. It collects, it's still really quite an astonishing artifact. It collects every single word, supposedly, that we use to communicate with one another. And it also includes all the silences, all the white spaces within the dictionary. But what it doesn't contain is the words that the dictionary makers left out, the words that were maybe part of slang or Creole or patois, or the words that were just invented this very minute. There is no such thing as an unabridged dictionary. Every dictionary is always abridged because there are new words that are always coming up, the words that are being either forcing themselves into the dictionary, or the words that are being forgotten. And Merriam-Webster, our good New England friend, who's with the offices still today in Springfield, Massachusetts, says of forgetting that which is not remembered. There is nothing more obfuscating, annoying than a dictionary definition that uses what Kant would describe as negative attributes. This is not this other thing. It's as if you define God as not the devil, or white as not black, or friendship as not animosity. I don't think that forgetting is not what is remembered. I think forgetting is far more complex and challenging. Maybe forgetting is the ability or the inability to retain information in one's mind. Maybe forgetting is that quality that we have to let go of certain elements that might be too dangerous for us, might be too fragile or disturbing. Maybe forgetting is also the mechanism through which we recognize that we don't have any control. In many ways, for me, forgetting is a statement of absence vis-a-vis the statement of presence that memory is. Nabokov says at one point in one of his novels that life is a spark of light bookended by darkness. And to me, memory is also a spark of recognition bookended by nothingness, or by absence, or by disappearance. We begin in that nothingness, and we go back to that nothingness. That darkness is the not knowing, and death, whenever we return to it, whenever we cease to be who we are, is also a return to that nothingness. And life is the vigorous attempt to control in our minds as much as possible of what we are and who we are through our own memory. It is beautiful, many of us who have been parents, to see when a baby begins to recognize certain words. Those words begin to be imprinted in the mind of that boy or that girl, or in those begin to define the identity of that individual. It is as pleasurable, again as a parent, to see how these terms, maybe the word mama or papa or the name of the child, get imprinted in the mind, and how a particular place or the pleasure of drinking milk or eating a joyful, sugary piece of food generate not only the joy of the present, but bring back a memory from the past that the child has already experienced. And that is probably the moment in which an individual begins to corral the aspects that they feel that are reactions to something they like, pleasure, and that pleasure eventually defines that individual. Maybe on the other side of life, we slowly give up or give away certain elements that have defined us so strictly, so methodically, so individually. My mother, may she rest in peace, died about 3 years ago at the age of just 80. She was the daughter of immigrants, Jewish, in Mexico, and she had been madly in love with my father for many, many years. In many ways, the death of my father as much as we tried to console her, announced to the rest of the family that she might not be with us for much longer. And one could see, as time went by, the shrinking of my mother, both physically in her own body, but also and particularly in her memory. To this day, I could not tell you what my mother died of. Doctors had all kinds of diagnoses to describe what she was going through. It is said that Pablo Neruda, who might have been poisoned at the end of his life, actually died of sadness, seeing his country under dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet in 1973. I don't know if doctors have in their medical books the diagnosis of sadness, but I wish they did, because this is certainly how I would describe the end of my mother. Sadness. Sadness as a form of slowly ceasing to be herself. Having been a very strong presence in life, she was becoming a ghost. Maybe there were elements of Alzheimer's. Certainly amnesia played an important role. And as we all know, because we live longer today than we used to, what happens with amnesia is a two-way street. It's the individual that stops or seizes or gives up or gives in the capacity of remembering. And it's also the entourage, those around, who are no longer remembered by that individual and feel that that connection is now becoming tenuous, that we are no longer for her who we were before, and feel that incredible sadness that she is experimenting. At the end of my mother's life, she, having been a therapist, having been a writer, having been very verbal, had almost maybe 12 words, 24 words altogether that she would use to communicate. And for me, it is that reversal that I was trying to convey to you, of a child that acquires the words as a way to memorize what the world is around, and then giving all the words as a way to surrender to the forgetting that is taking place. And magically, many of those words were not in Spanish, were in Yiddish. My grandmother, as the daughter of Yiddish-speaking Eastern European Polish immigrants, had grown up with Yiddish, the language of immigration, but along the way, she, as many others in her generation, had given up that language in order to become a full-fledged citizen of Mexico in Spanish, a lover, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and the many other personalities the identities that she had. Only listening to Yiddish songs, only asking me to come back to her with Yiddish would ignite a smile in her face. And I could see that she was being surrounded by a whole fog or cloud of forgetting or forgetfulness. There is a moment in one of the best novels that I know, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, published in 1967, Cien Años de Soledad, where in the town of Macondo, which is the main setting of this novel, all the inhabitants begin to suffer of an epidemic of insomnia. Gabriel Garcia Marquez was often asked, how did he come up with these beautiful images of an epidemic of insomnia, of a rainstorm of butterflies, in such magical terms. And he would say that that was actually a feature of his life and that there wasn't anything surreal or unreal, but that it was actually pretty realistic what he was describing. When the Macondinos, those in Macondo, can no longer sleep and can no longer dream, the immediate reaction that they have is that they start forgetting everything that is around them. One of the next scenes that happens in 100 Years of Solitude is that they, concerned by the fact that now they don't know which is the house that is theirs, and where do they have to work, and what a cow is for, and a table is for, and a pen is for, and a hat is for, need to use a method whereby they are going to face forgetfulness as strongly as possible. And without using the word Montessori, they do a kind of Montessori approach. They put a sign next on the cow that says cow, hat, house, so on and so forth. But then they don't know the relationship between the word cow and the cow, and what is a cow for, or what is a house for, or what is a hat for. And the next step is that they add to this signs that say cow, you milk it every morning, and then you put it next to in the pasture for the cow to eat. They feel as if forgetfulness is taking over them and that they have to face it with the act and art of language, which in many ways is how we confront that absence, which is forgetting. I love that scene, and I love the fact that there is a deep connection between what for Garcia Marquez means to forget and what it means also for him to dream. It seems that our capacity to be able to remember and to defy forgetfulness is intimately related with that other mechanism of the mind, which is that when we are not conscious, when we seize control of ourselves and allow our imagination to take over, and we dream, we let those images and that theater really act on its own. We are actually engaged in the effort of thinking. We would not think that dreams are thought, but in Garcia Marquez's view, dreams are essential so that when we wake up the next day, we are able to think fully. There are many statements in history, in literature, in art about the impact of forgetting. There is a beautiful book by a Russian neurologist called The Mind of a Mnemonist, A.R. Luria, that speaks of a soldier during the First World War who suffers of a trauma, an injury, and ceases to know who he is. And the whole process and the whole book is an account of the therapy that with Dr. Luria that patient engages in order to recover his own memory. As if memory was a treasure box or a bank of information that you could lose at a particular time in life, and then through therapy, through medicine, through other mechanisms, regain it. Is that really possible? A counter book of the one that Luria proposes in The Mind of a Mnemonist is one where he discusses the mind. He wrote it about 3 years later, The Man with a Shattered Memory, where he discusses the portentous mind of an individual who is able to remember everything. And here I want to make a little intermission to talk about, as we know, different types of memory, photographic memory and mathematical memory, immediate memory and long-term memory, and the failures of these different types of memory. This individual was able, if you told him, he ended up becoming a circus and magic performances freak, that you would give him 500 numbers organized at random, and he would be able to recite them back to you from beginning to end or from end to the beginning. And you could also ask him to start in the middle, and he would go in one direction and in the other direction. A man who was capable of remembering everything. What would happen to us if we were able to remember everything? This brings me to probably the short story in Latin America that I like the most. It's by Jorge Luis Borges, an Argentine writer, and it's called Funes de Memorias. This is also the story of a man called Funes, Irineo Funes, who is able to remember everything after he has a freak accident where he falls from a horse. And now all of a sudden, the narrator tells us, he is able to remember the shape of the clouds on Wednesday at 3:35 p.m., exactly as they were, in contrast with the shape of the clouds on Saturday at 9:35 a.m. He would remember the entire translation of Ovid's Metamorphoses, or an entire chapter of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire by Gibson. What Irineo Funes was unable to do is think. He was so overwhelmed by the capacity to have every information that the narrator of the story tells us. In order to relive a day of his life, he needed an entire day. So punctilious, so detailed was he. But what he couldn't do is live life in that day, because he was fully and exclusively devoted to the act of remembering. So maybe the main argument that I want to pose here, though I am trying as much as I can to resist the temptation to be talking about memory and focusing on forgetting as such. Forgetting is the necessary, maybe this is the definition that Merriam-Webster needs, the one that would supplement or replace the one that I felt was so inefficient. Forgetfulness is the capacity to select and to curate what not only we want to have, but what we don't want to have, what we don't want to keep for the future or for ourselves. For eventually the capacity to see things as abstractions, the capacity to see things on themselves as value, depends on the fact that we don't remember everything about our childhood or everything about the first love that we had, or when we bought the first home. We select, or haphazardly those memories are selected, and in contrast or in competition with them are all those memories that were not selected, that were left behind, maybe in a black hole, the way that the astronomers describe what is happening in the galaxy, in the universe, where everything that doesn't become part of us, that shadow that always follows us, gets inside and allows us to be free, allows us to be able to engage with the various aspects of who we are. One of the pleasures, and very seldom do we invoke them that way, one of the pleasures of forgetting is the capacity to forgive and not to resent and not to be handcuffed by a memory that has traumatized us to such degree that defines us as the only one that is pertinent or unique for our lives. One of the capacities of giving up through forgetting is the recognition that for as much as we want to control who we are and control the surroundings that we have, it is not possible. And giving up, giving in to forgetfulness allows us to move forward and to be who we are. One of the images that has always haunted me, and for me, forgetting is a way to be haunted, but a way to find harmony with that haunted aspect, appears in the book On Borrowed Words. It's a memoir about growing up in different languages. And thank you to the bookstore for having that and other books for sale here. Toward the end of the book, I describe a moment in which I was coming back from a lecture in the West Coast and had to change flights, planes in the Houston airport. It was very crowded, and I went and got myself some coffee and a bagel and the New York Times. At that time, you still read the newspaper as such, and the newspaper itself is all the news that fit to print, meaning there's a lot that is not fitted to be printed, all the other side of the newspaper, and decided that I was going to relax and just wait, when I became immediately, urgently, frighteningly aware of a lady that was sitting not too many feet ahead of me, who was looking at the empty space, seated with her purse tight on her lap, and the shadow of a watch on her wrist. Clearly, someone or she herself had taken it off, and in many ways, this lady was living outside time. Every 2 or 3 minutes, she would open her purse, look intensely at what was inside, and then not find it, close the purse, and again focus on the empty space that was in front of her. It was, at the beginning, to me, a curious form of behavior and distracted me from the news of the day. And as I retained my attention on her, I realized that this was a compulsive action. She was doing it repeatedly. She was not going or coming anywhere in that airport where all of us are just coming and going directly all the time from one place to another, in transit, forgotten by just about everybody else, and looking, in my own interpretation, probably for a ticket or for a phone or for her wallet or for herself. I became myself very disturbed, and at one point tried to avoid the reality and went to the bathroom. When I came back, I was hoping that she would no longer be there, but she was, and now she was surrounded by 2 and maybe 3, just for a moment, policemen who had come, had been alerted about her, and were asking her who she was. And because I was sitting behind, they also asked me a number of questions. And the lady could not say her name, could not say if she had arrived to the Houston airport or she was about to depart, if somebody was waiting for her or she was waiting for somebody. She did not know. Memory had disappeared in her altogether, and now she was, or maybe the verb no longer applies. Was she anybody? Could she still be described as herself? I remember the policeman asking her specifically for her name and for any relative that they could call, and sadly she could not tell them anything that was solid or concrete or was helpful. Just the act of remembering our name, the house that we left this morning and will go back to, the fact that we use that type of jacket or those glasses, or that after this we are expecting a phone call, all those elements that make us who we are, define us, and give us a purpose, take them away, and what is left, it's matter, sheer matter, aimless, stationed without purpose or without a direction. This becomes especially affecting when you are in one of those public spaces where all of us seem so rushed to arrive or to go, seem so decisive in the fact that we have a future and that we come from a past. All of us maybe just sharing for a moment that space and then taking off for the next one. She was left there and I was left there looking at her. Eventually the policemen took her somewhere. They asked me if I had seen anybody close to her, if anybody had stolen something from her purse, if her watch had disappeared in front of me. They asked me if I had talked to her in any way, and I wished that I had talked to her, but I don't know. I was so paralyzed by that scene. It frightened me then, and it frightens me to this day. I remembered it many times when my mother was dying. In many ways, my mother was also figuratively looking at her purse, thinking of the Yiddish words that maybe were a key for her to remember something about her past that all of us supposedly reminded her of, but less and less so at the end of the big numbers of people that she knew and that would parade through the house to say goodbye. She could only remember my name and my sister's name. I would tell her something about our shared past that she wouldn't quite know. And I and my sister and the rest of us, as we struggled, we also often talked about the fact that in the end, for her to make peace with that forgetfulness was also an invitation for us to recognize that that forgetfulness, no matter how much you try to avoid it, to resist it, to negate it, will ultimately win who we are. And that as long as we are here and we can state that I am who I am and that I have a purpose, we battle it. But it is only temporary, because again, to come back to Nabokov, life is a spark of light bookended by an ocean of darkness, or a spark of memory bookended by a big black hole of forgetfulness. I started with Neruda. It's always good to start with Neruda. And I will end with Elizabeth Bishop. It's always wonderful to end with Elizabeth Bishop. Among other reasons, because some of her poems are such, seem to me so close to perfection, that if you shake the book, and this is the poetry of Elizabeth Bishop, and let the words go into the space and then try to catch them, they fall exactly in the same place that she intended. So precise, so calculating she was. I am sure that many of you know this poem, One Art. It's a poem that maybe, as Robert Frost would say, was here with us before it was written. And it goes like this. It's a poem about disaster. It's a poem about letting go. It's not a poem necessarily about forgetting, but it's a poem necessarily about forgetting. One Art. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost, that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day. Accept the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing faster, losing farther, faces and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of this will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of the 3 love houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster, some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I miss them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster. Forgetfulness. It's not a disaster. We will eventually all get there, sooner or later. It's the peace that we make with forgetfulness. It's the arrangements that we set through life with what we keep and what we slowly dispense of. Memory is a beautiful thing. Forgetting, as Neruda would say, is long, way long. Love can rescue us from forgetting. Eventually, though, all of us will be forgotten, and that's fine. That's part of life. It is not a disaster. Forgetting is actually our capacity to engage with what matters, to distill what's best for us, and to dance in between what we keep and what we let go, who we are and the versions of ourselves that we are not. All of that is fine. All of that maybe is a form of love. All of that is no disaster. Elizabeth Bishop talks of losing cities, losing an entire continent. This she puts in the same list with losing a set of keys or a number of photographs. How many of us wake up in the morning and say, where did I put my glasses? Where are my keys? And that anxiety of not knowing where things are. Things like to move on themselves. Things have a life of their own, and we are here to account for them. Eventually, they will win. In my view of things, we are the center of gravity of all those objects that surround us. And when we are no longer there, the objects go in every single direction, just as the words of a poem might go in every single direction. But somebody later on, a new life, a new self, a new memory will bring them together and struggle again with what can be remembered and what eventually will be forgotten. Thank you very much, and thank you. Maybe we can open it to some reflections or comments by anybody, if you remember what you wanted to say. Please.
I'm just wondering what you do, I mean, it's what you're talking about, but with that sort of terror of forgetting, that sort of threatens to paralyze you, like you were saying in one story about just spending so much time actively remembering that you don't have time for anything new.
Yeah, terror is such a word. Terror. I don't know that you can tame terror. I think it will be with you. It has been with me. The anxiety that connects with terror. Maybe also this relationship with forgetfulness comes when you get older and you realize that it's a lost battle, wanting to remember everything or wanting to pass things to the next generation. At 64, I wish I could tell you that terror could be put to sleep or put aside, but it stays, and it could maybe be turned into a source or engine of creativity in some ways. That's an artist thinking at things. Use the terror, turn it into a poem, turn it into a dance, turn it into an idea, a class with a child, a political statement. But it would be foolish to think that you would vanish it, because it's part of consciousness. Maybe there's envy in me for those forms of life that are not conscious, and as a result do not fear the ever-expanding nature of forgetfulness in life.
Could you elaborate on forgetting and forgiveness? I think like a lot of times people will say like, I forgive you, but I won't forget.
Yeah.
But if forgiveness necessitates forgetting that, could you just explain a little bit more about that relationship?
Isaac, I think it's a wonderful question. Yes, I don't think there's forgiveness without forgetting, though we often say, I will not forget what happened. Remembering, as I tried to imply, can also be a form of imprisonment for the person who remembers. And it's true, we need to remember in order to not to fall into the same patterns in the future, in order to move forward. But if we remember and get stuck in that act of remembering without allowing a sense of let go, I think we ourselves become trapped. It's in some ways like the dialectic between the enslaver and the slave. Who is more dependent on the other? Of course, one is suffering and the other one is free. One is controlled and the other one is controlling. But the controller is always in the act of controlling and is not free themselves to do as they wish. Such intent is invested in having another as an indenture figure. And I would say something similar to in the act of forgetting and forgiving. I think the recognition of what we went through is essential, but getting stuck in that remembering and not allowing to let go of that memory can turn you, can cut your wings and not let you go forward. Some of us need to work harder than others. There are some people that let go in an easier and faster way than others. But just as it is crucial to remembering can also be incredibly paralyzing. And I say this as a grandchild of immigrants and also as a descendant of people who went through the Holocaust. For many of us, directly and otherwise, the duty to remember was instilled from the moment we started life. You are here, maybe even replacing somebody that's no longer here, who perished, and you must make your life meaningful because you were given that log, that fate that somebody else was deprived of. It is an incredibly humbling responsibility. It's also an obligation. Remember, you are here to remember. That could be, that can numb you. You remember for yourself, but you also have to remember for your people, and you have to remember for history, bearing witness. It was essential to many of our education, certainly to mine. What wasn't stressed enough was the capacity to forget. And I think that in my own case, it has been a desire to find out what it means to let go without stopping to bear witness of the time in which you lived. And I was mentioning to you when we introduced to one another your biblical name, even from the names that we are given, the name of a grandfather, or the name of an ancestor, or the name of an icon in one's culture, that you will be like Isaac, or you will be like Joseph. There is already a passing of the torch of remembering and forgetting. And again, in a culture like ours, where it is very important to remember, we all the time are playing with the temptations of forgetting. One of them is censorship. Censoring an individual, censoring a book, and we live in the age of censorship. In the United States, more than probably at any time before, we are told either by a president or by an administration or by an ideology, this should not be remembered. This should be taken out of the library or the classroom or what have you. Take that memory out. I want to tell you what you should remember or shouldn't remember. People take the duty or the responsibility or the facetiousness of endowing you with what you should remember and what you should forget, when it should be either a personal choice or a family choice or a group choice or a local choice, certainly not an ideological choice that comes from far and from above. Yeah, these are difficult times, times in which the young people can easily censor somebody on social media. We will not remember this person, this name, this face will be eliminated from our database. Or when an administration tells you we're not going to give you money for this because this is not what should be done, this is not what should be remembered. It would be foolish to think this is the first time we've gone through something like this. We've gone through it before, and we will go through it again, but there is no question that we are living at a very intense time. And it's a battle between what can be remembered, should be remembered, what is forgotten and what is not forgotten. And all of us are in the business of taking one side and the other, even when we pretend not to take sides.
Yeah, I was thinking about the theme of forgiveness and forget. And I think we should never forget, because this is a learning experience. The learning experience is turning into a positive experience when we forgive anybody outside or when we forgive ourselves.
Yeah, ourselves.
Then once we forgive, then that experience can be remembered without being attached to it and being negative.
I can see
But
perfectly.
it is a learning experience.
Yeah.
So we cannot forget.
Yeah,
Because if we forget, we're going to do it again.
yeah. I can perfectly see what you're saying, and I absolutely agree. Not just because of my own metabolism or my own nature, though I might sound in front of you as someone who can remember lots of things, when it comes to emotional aspects, I can easily forget. And that can work both positively or negatively in my life. It's not a voluntary act. It's just a natural act. I fully agree with you. The first thing in order to forgive is to remember, and then you assimilate it, and then you move forward.
Yeah, I think it works.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the irony right now is that all of these terrible things that are happening are that I will remember them. Like, I do remember
Right.
McCarthy.
Yeah.
Although I didn't think of that era until recently.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a medieval thinker, Marsilio Ficino, who argued that memory is a theater, truly in the form of a theater, a stage with curtains and a place for the actor, a green room for the actors to change. And he suggested that the uniqueness of memory is that in this type of theater, the actor, the architecture, and the audience are all you. You are the theater, you perform in the theater, and you choose what performances will be done, or you might not even have the choice to decide what goes in and what doesn't. One of the aspects, I don't know if I would describe, although I am a big lover of theater, I don't know if I would necessarily describe memory as a theater. To me, sometimes it can feel more like like one of those cinematographers that chooses certain images and projects them on the wall. I think that we remember things at different moments depending on what the present is infringing upon us. And certain things will be deposited in a bank that will be kind of laying there dormant and then resurfaced because the present is pushing us to think of those things. I fully agree. I remember I did not think too much of the dictatorial regime I grew up in Mexico. I thought that everybody lived in a dictatorial regime like Mexico had. And eventually when I was a young man, I thought I would go to a country that didn't have a dictatorial regime, the United States. And I tried other countries before. And I can't tell you what I feel right now because I can't fully articulate it, that it is here where that dictatorial regime is taking place, where it feels that the encroachment of liberties is advancing faster and faster. In Mexico, an absolutely imperfect democracy, an unfair economic society, feels much more just and appealing than when I was growing up in Mexico. I never thought that somebody from my own background, in my own neighborhood, would become president. And there's a reversal that is going up in me right now in these last few months of not quite longing to move back to Mexico. You and I were talking just before, but having a certain sense that the society that I chose to live in, this one, is angry with itself, lives in a state of opposition. And the society that I chose to live behind, Mexico, that I couldn't live fast enough when I was in my 20s, now feels happier. Again, I'm not painting Mexico as a utopia. It's far from a utopia. But it doesn't feel angry with itself. And so the things that I didn't remember when I was living in Mexico, now I remember because of what I'm going through here. And it kind of turns things upside down. So I can see perfectly what you're saying of a certain period that didn't mean that much at a moment that now all of a sudden becomes very relevant. Anybody else before we close? Please.
Yes, it's difficult to speak, obviously, about such matters that are so personal.
Sure.
But one must speak in the first person. I have family in Europe and Palestine, and so I have some thoughts about the unfortunate efforts of some to recall terrible past events in order to justify what is happening now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I can speak from my own life to say that growing up in an immigrant family in the United States, where we were fortunate and grew up in a Yiddish-speaking family who were safe here and happy. I'm charmed to be recovering my Yiddish now, which is otherwise a forgotten language, and I am pleased to be able to think that, in fact, the United States is indeed a country governed by the rule of law. I believe our Supreme Court has defeated the fascist effort, and it is failing, and the rule of law will govern despite all these bizarre criminal efforts. So I think it is not bad to, at this time, perhaps too much remembering of the Holocaust is not a good thing.
Absolutely. I'm very thankful and appreciative of what you just said, and I know it's very personal as you mentioned it. Yes, absolutely. I think it's crucial that we don't forget these things, that we also recognize that we're going through a difficult patch, a difficult moment, but that the institutions that we have in this country have been strong and remain strong, even though they are being tested eminently at the present time. There is no individual that doesn't go through ordeals, and those ordeals define that individual, and there is no country that doesn't go through ordeals and challenges, and ultimately that country will come closer to knowing what it is and how it defines itself. Yeah, many of us who chose this country see what is happening in a way that is defined by the place we left it. But your words are sobering and very important, and the remembering is crucial, even in times like this.
If I can trouble you with one more remark, those of us who live in Norwich are very aware of our friend Mohsen Madawi, who is at the moment the world figure, speaking of forgiveness, and he has not forgotten, but he is a Palestinian who has learned to love.
Yeah.
And he speaks of forgiveness and of peace between the two states in Palestine,
Yeah.
which, well,
Yeah.
I can't help repeating that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please.
About forgiving, I mean, there's not a day now that I don't forget something. I'm trying to remember something,
Yeah.
and a name, a movie, a song, a person, whatever. A word, I was using one word a little while ago. I could not remember the word molding. It just didn't come out. So I think sometimes, and I remember the word afterwards. So sometimes it's not that we forgive, it's just we don't get the link to retrieve
Yeah.
what we have inside our little brains
Yeah.
here, which is, I believe, a huge amount of information.
Yeah.
And we cannot remember everything that happened in our lives. We're only going to remember certain events.
Right.
And sometimes, out of the blue, one thing will pop up, and you say, "Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's been 50 years I haven't thought about this," and here it is. You know, we also remember things, and I used an example that I remembered and felt guilty about my little brother. I lost his marbles when I was 5 or 6. We had each a bag of marbles.
Yeah.
I used mine, I lost them, I took his one, and
And you still remember that?
I remember the worst part I felt guilty about. And then one day, finally, I decided, no, I got to get that. I talked to my brother about it. He said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And, you know, so it's like, okay, there are things we should forgive.
Yeah.
We should
Yeah.
forget
Yeah.
and not remember. But there
Beautiful.
are things that martyrize us, and we don't know why.
Yeah. Martyrizes is the nice word.
Forgetting things is not a bad thing.
No, forgetting
It's not a
things
bad thing.
is a good thing. I mean, it goes through all those layers and levels that we were talking about, but I think forgetting is a good thing. I also want to stress the fact that every generation has to remember more than the generation before. Though we don't have more capacity to remember, there's more information to remember, or at least to process. And being a teacher already for 35 years, one eventually surrenders to the idea that the generations come, some of them incredibly prepared, others less so, and that ultimately what you help the students do is not so much remember, because today there are more machines to remember than there were when we were little, but to figure out how to process the information. We don't teach students how to handle information, how to acquire information. They already have an abundance of that. We teach them how to process knowledge. Information and knowledge are two different things. And creating knowledge is with information with insight, with that machines, that AI cannot do. And that is a negotiation with remembering the information, but also forgetting, as you're saying. It's very important to let go of all kinds of things in order to move on. And talking about letting go, it's such a pleasure to see you all, and be well, and thank you for remembering to come today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you.
That was beautiful. I love children who are like storytellers, because they know how to paint pictures, and so I can just copy it and do it easily.